For more on the Morrison government's $747 million upgrade to ADF training bases in the Northern Territory and the other big stories making headlines today, I'm joined from Sydney by Editor-at-Large of The Australian, Paul Kelly. Paul, the Prime Minister has made no secret of the fact that these upgraded facilities in the top end will be used by US Marines as well as ADF personnel. How important is this investment?
Well, I think this is yet another step, Rita, in terms of Scott Morrison's overall upgrading of Australian defence and deepening ties with the United States. Morrison, from the time he became Prime Minister, has been most anxious to promote his national security credentials. And of course, the more things have gone wrong with China, then the more important this has been for the Prime Minister. So some of this has been foreshadowed before. But I think the important thing is, from the time of the defence update in the middle of last year, Scott Morrison has indicated that he wants to do more on defence, that he wants to spend more than 2% of GDP on defence, that he wants to see a better integration of Australia's ties with the United States, more military training in terms of the top end of Australia, and this is all about that strategy.
Well, turning to a related issue, one of Australia's top defence analysts has urged the federal government to take back control of the port of Newcastle after 50% of the facility was sold to a Chinese company in 2014. Peter Jennings, the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, says the port, which handles 30% of Australia's coal exports, is vulnerable to foreign interference by Beijing. Paul, is Peter Jennings right here, and does the Morrison government have the power to seize control of an asset like this?
Rita, this is a very difficult issue, and there are a number of, I think, fundamental points to make about this in relation to not just the port of Newcastle, but the port of Darwin as well, which the Prime Minister made some comments about today. Now, the starting point here is that these are commercial deals that are done and dusted. The money's been paid. This is not a prospective foreign investment proposal before the government. This is quite different. This is a commercial deal, and I think if the government was to attempt to unwind this, the legal and financial issues would be very significant. Now, the other point to make about this is that the government would only do this if it had very clear advice from the security agencies and from the Defence Department that these port agreements, that these port commercial arrangements were in fact a threat to national security. Now, we know the Defence Department at the time of the Port of Darwin issue looked at this and decided there was no grounds on which to act in terms of national security. That is, that there was no national security problem. Now, since then, of course, we've had a number of politicians indicate their concerns about this. We've had a number of outside experts indicate their concerns, but it's yet to be demonstrated exactly how ownership of a port contributes to China's economic coercion against Australia. The port clearly has got to operate according to Australian law. You could argue that levies or taxes on the port imposed by the owner could be a problem, but it's hard to sort of distinguish there between what's a national security problem and what is simply a commercial undertaking. So this is complex. But the point I would make finally about this is that we did have, I think, a pretty significant comment from the Prime Minister today in relation to the Port of Darwin, where he indicated that so far there was no advice from the Defence Department that there was a problem. But by saying that, if you like, he left the door open to perhaps asking the Defence Department to have another look at this. Now that's now that's my speculation on that last point, but he did leave it up in the air, I think.
Yes, I think it's just a position that a lot of Australians aren't comfortable with, having Chinese control of such vital assets, whatever the Defence Department sees as the risk factors there. But turning to another issue, Australians view Scott Morrison as more likeable and more caring than Anthony Albanese, according to the latest news poll. The news survey published in The Australian today also shows voters view Morrison as more trustworthy than the Labor leader, although Albanese is seen as less arrogant than the Prime Minister. Paul, I want to just put this in black and white for my viewers at home. Let's just go through the data. Morrison is seen as decisive and strong by 65% of voters compared to 45% for Albanese. On Vision for Australia, Morrison is ahead 70% to 54%. On Cares for People, Morrison is ahead 63% to 59%. And 63% of voters see Morrison as likeable compared to 52% for Albanese. The only measure on which Anthony Albanese has the upper hand on Scott Morrison is what we mentioned earlier, arrogance. Some 52% of voters see the PM as arrogant compared to 40% who say the same about the opposition leader. What's your reaction to these numbers, Paul? And would Anthony Albanese be the factor that sees voters turn away from Labor at the next poll? Is Anthony Albanese electable as Prime Minister?
Well, Rita, I think the poll is interesting because it indicates that on a range of indicators, Scott Morrison has the lead over Anthony Albanese, although with some of them not all that much. But I guess to put this in context, the next election is going to be a very tight and competitive election. And the thinking from the government point of view is that, of course, all elections are relative contests. And while Labor is leading at the moment in two-party preferred terms, 51-49, the government's thinking is as follows, that if Morrison is seen as a superior leader, a better Prime Minister, and better on those measures, then that's going to be a very important plus for the government. Its thinking is also that if the government is seen to be a better economic manager, a better manager of the virus crisis and the vaccine, and a better manager on national security, then those qualitative factors together will put the government in a strong underlying position. So clearly the government will take heart from that. Should we conclude from this that Anthony Albanese is not electable? No, we should most certainly not conclude that. As I said, the election is going to be tight, it's going to be competitive, but the government obviously will take heart from those measures.
Well, quick last question for you, Paul. I want to ask you about the results of an essential poll published in The Guardian yesterday, which shows less than half of Australians over the age of 50 would be happy to receive the AstraZeneca vaccine. Has the government shot itself in the foot with its muddled messaging over AstraZeneca? Are you surprised by these figures?
Well, I'm not surprised, but this is a real problem. We knew from the start of the year that there was going to be a difficulty having the public accept the vaccine, having the public with confidence about the vaccine. And there's no doubt that the government's chopping and changing on this front, the new arrangements, the changed arrangements, the difficulty with the vaccine, the problems with supply, then the problems with safety. All this has clearly contributed to a confidence problem. Now, we'll have to see the way this plays out during the course of the year. It's going to be very important for the government to ensure that that a majority of the population, in fact an overwhelming majority of the population, up around 80%, take the vaccine. That means that this confidence problem has got to be addressed and rectified. There's still time to do that, but is it a serious issue? Yes, it is, and it is a real problem at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. We need to get some confidence back into the vaccine and also roll out the program a lot quicker than we have been. Paul Kelly, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks, Rita.